In 1952, there were two distinct categories of being sick. There was the kind of sick that required a doctor, something broken, a serious ailment, or something needing a professional diagnosis. That necessitated a visit to the doctor's office. Every other type of illness was handled at home by your grandmother. She didn't rely on guessing or hoping. She used methods that had been tested on every family member for 3 generations. She didn't view it as practicing medicine. She simply viewed it as knowing exactly what to do. This is the knowledge she held. One thing to note before we reach number 15. If you haven't subscribed yet, this list is the perfect reason to do so. Every one of these remedies used to be common knowledge, and we are bringing that knowledge back. Number 15. Salt and warm water. The moment her throat began to feel scratchy, she was at the stove. She used 1 teaspoon of salt dissolved in 1 cup of warm water. Not hot, just warm. The treatment was 30 seconds of gargling 4 times a day, requiring no appointment and no copay. In 2005, researchers at Kyoto University published a randomized controlled trial in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, tracking 387 volunteers through a cold and flu season. The group that gargled showed a significantly lower rate of upper respiratory infections. Researchers described simple water gargling as an effective way to prevent upper respiratory tract infections and called the method virtually cost-free. Today, the sore throat treatment market, which includes lozenges, sprays, numbing drops, and prescription antivirals, is worth over $1, $5 billion annually. The salt, however, was already sitting in her kitchen. Number 14. Honey, lemon, and warm water. If a cough settled in, the specific kind that kept a child awake at night, she prepared a cup consisting of a tablespoon of honey, half a lemon, and warm water. The child would drink it slowly while sitting up in bed, and the cough usually eased within the hour. In 2020, a systematic review in BMJ Evidence-Based Medicine analyzed 14 randomized controlled trials comparing honey against standard cough treatments, including dextromethorphan, the active ingredient in most commercial children's syrups. Honey outperformed standard care regarding cough frequency, severity, and disrupted sleep. The World Health Organization currently lists honey as a demulcent in its official cough management guidelines. In 2007, the FDA concluded that dextromethorphan was not effective in children under 12. The pediatric cough syrup market had been worth billions when that guidance arrived. Honey worked, while the replacement used for decades did not. Number 13. Oil of cloves. This was the little brown bottle kept in the back of the cabinet. She rarely needed it, but when a tooth ached in the middle of the night, really ached, she soaked a small square of cotton in oil of cloves and packed it against the gum. The ache receded within minutes, just as it always had. The active compound in clove oil is eugenol. Today, eugenol is the primary ingredient in zinc oxide eugenol cement, the material dentists use to pack temporary cavities between appointments. It is still utilized as a topical anesthetic in the dental chair. Every dentist in America uses the same compound she kept in a 15-cent bottle. While the global dental care market is now worth over $50 billion annually, her solution was a simple 15-cent bottle. Number 12. Fresh ginger. Long before ginger ale came in a bottle, she used the real thing. The smell alone was half the medicine. She grated a thumb-sized piece of fresh ginger into a cup of boiling water, strained it, added honey, and served it warm to anyone feeling nauseated. It was used for motion sickness, morning sickness, or a stomach that had had a difficult day. Researchers at the University of Michigan Medical Center documented ginger's anti-nausea effects in a randomized controlled trial published in Anesthesiology, finding it effective for post-operative nausea. The active compounds, gingerols and shogaols, inhibit serotonin receptors in the gut that trigger nausea responses. The anti-nausea medication market now runs into billions of dollars annually. Ironically, the commercial ginger ale most Americans reach for today contains no measurable amount of real ginger. Number 11. Baking soda. This was the yellow box in the back of the pantry. After a heavy meal, she did not reach for a tablet. Instead, she stirred a quarter teaspoon of baking soda into a small glass of water and drank it slowly. The fizz rose and the heartburn vanished. Sodium bicarbonate neutralizes stomach acid through a direct chemical reaction. This is pure chemistry, not folk medicine. It is also the reason Alka-Seltzer works. Introduced in 1931, Alka-Seltzer is primarily sodium bicarbonate with aspirin and citric acid added for effervescence. It is the same compound she already had in the pantry for 19 cents a box. The global antacid market is now worth over $8 billion annually. She didn't call it chemistry. She called it what her mother had shown her. Her solution often ran out before the year did. None of these remedies required a waiting room or a prescription. Every one of them worked on the same human body that modern treatments target because the body has not changed. What changed is who was allowed to treat it. Number 10. Chicken soup. This is the remedy a peer-reviewed study confirmed in a major American medical journal in the year 2000. It does exactly what she always said it did. It wasn't from a can, it was Sunday's chicken, 3 hours in a pot on the stove. She made it from the carcass of Sunday's birds, simmered low with onions, celery and black pepper until the broth ran deep. Anyone sick in that house received a bowl of something that had been on the stove since morning. In 2000, Dr. Barbara Rennard and Dr. Stephen Rennard at the Nebraska Medical Center published a study in the journal Chest titled "Chicken Soup Inhibits Neutrophil Chemotaxis in Vitro." They found the soup significantly inhibited neutrophils, the white blood cells responsible for upper respiratory inflammation. Each vegetable ingredient showed individual activity, and the complete soup showed this without side effects or toxicity. The authors concluded it may contain substances with beneficial medicinal activity. That same year, Campbell's Soup Company earned $9 billion in revenue, but their condensed broth is not the same thing. Number 9. Apple Cider Vinegar Tonic. This was the morning tonic that a Vermont doctor put on the New York Times bestseller list. In 1958, Dr. D.C. Jarvis, a country doctor who practiced in rural Vermont for decades, published a book called Folk Medicine. It reached number 1 on the bestseller list. His central recommendation was the same morning tonic your grandmother had been making long before he had a book deal: apple cider vinegar, raw honey, and warm water. She stirred 2 teaspoons into a glass of water every morning, sometimes with raw honey. That was it. It had been her mother's habit, and her grandmother's before that. Research in diabetes care has since found that acetic acid, the active compound in apple cider vinegar, measurably improves insulin sensitivity after meals in people with insulin resistance. A bottle of store-brand apple cider vinegar costs 29 cents. Today, the global apple cider vinegar market is worth over $1. $3 billion. Number 8. Mustard plaster. This was the remedy she made from the pantry when a cold moved to the chest. When the cough deepened and sitting up became necessary, she made a mustard plaster. She mixed dry mustard powder with flour and warm water, spread the paste onto a cloth, and laid it on the chest with a protective layer of linen against the skin. She left it in place for 20 minutes. The heat built slowly, and the chest loosened. The active compound in ground mustard seed, allyl isothiocyanate, is a counter-irritant that increases blood circulation to the underlying airways. This is the same therapeutic principle behind modern topical pain relief products like capsaicin cream and methyl salicylate patches, products representing hundreds of millions in annual sales. She made it for the cost of a tablespoon of dry mustard. It was uncomfortable, but that was the point. Number 7. Edgar Case's Castor Oil Pack. This sounds like something from a seance rather than a medicine cabinet. The man behind it claimed his medical knowledge arrived while he was asleep. What he couldn't have known is that decades after his death, peer-reviewed laboratories would find he had been right. Edgar Cayce was the most famous medical intuitive in American history, known as the Sleeping Prophet. He died in 1945, but his castor oil recommendation was cited in American kitchens for decades after. It involved warm castor oil applied to a flannel cloth laid across the lower abdomen and covered with a heating pad for an hour. It was used for menstrual pain, constipation, and persistent abdominal discomfort. Ricinoleic acid, the primary fatty acid in castor oil, has demonstrated anti-inflammatory and analgesic properties in peer-reviewed laboratory research. The FDA approves castor oil as a stimulant laxative. The Association for Research and Enlightenment has documented decades of case reports. She didn't need the study. She had watched it work. The bottle of castor oil cost 29 cents. Number 6. Garlic Russian penicillin. When a cold announced itself, when the throat tightened and the body signaled something was coming, she reached for the garlic. It went into broth with honey, or sometimes was eaten raw with bread. The elders in her family called it the strongest medicine in the kitchen. During the Second World War, when penicillin supplies were critically short, Soviet military medics used garlic paste on wounds and administered it orally to soldiers with early signs of infection. The compound allicin, released when garlic is crushed, has documented antimicrobial properties against various bacteria in laboratory research. Albert Schweitzer, the 1952 Nobel Peace Prize winner, used garlic to treat dysentery at his hospital in Gabon when pharmaceuticals were unavailable. While garlic does not treat serious systemic infections, a doctor is still needed for those. The instinct to use it for what the body was fighting off before it became serious was correct. None of this is alternative medicine. Every study cited here was published in a peer-reviewed medical journal. No company funded clinical trials for saltwater or garlic because those things cannot be patented. Research follows money, and money follows patents. Number 5. Epsom salt bath. This involved 2 cups of Epsom salt in a full tub of warm water. At the end of a week that hadn't stopped, after standing, lifting, and dealing with the accumulated ache of a body that had been used, she drew a bath. She dissolved the salt and soaked for 20 minutes to soothe swollen ankles, aching knuckles, and a lower back that hadn't been quiet since Thursday. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate. Magnesium is required for more than 300 enzymatic reactions in the human body, including muscle contraction and nerve function. Whether it absorbs significantly through bathwater remains a subject of debate, and the relief may come partly from the warm water itself. However, it is not debated that magnesium deficiency is associated with muscle pain and fatigue. This therapeutic bath cost only 29 cents. Number 4. The hot water bottle. She didn't call it a condition. She called it her time. And she managed it the same way every month. She used a rubber hot water bottle filled from the kettle, wrapped in cloth, and laid across the lower abdomen while she sat or lay down for an hour. Every woman in her family had done this, and none of them called the doctor. Research from University College London documented that heat applied to the abdomen at approximately 40 degrees Celsius temporarily blocks pain receptors, specifically heat-sensitive channels that suppress signals sent by prostaglandins, the compounds responsible for uterine cramping. The pain relief was found to be comparable to ibuprofen for mild to moderate menstrual pain. A rubber hot water bottle cost $1.50 in 1955 and lasted 15 winters. Today, the ibuprofen market is worth over $3 billion annually. Number 3. Raw honey for wounds. She kept a jar of honey in the kitchen for more than just cooking. She kept it near the stove where accidents happened. For a small burn from the stovetop or a cut from a bread knife, she cleaned the area, applied a thin layer of raw honey, and covered it with a clean cloth. It healed cleanly. She didn't think much about why, as her mother had done the same. Raw honey has an acidity between 3, 2 and 4, 5 on the pH scale, which is acidic enough to inhibit the growth of most bacteria. It also generates small amounts of hydrogen peroxide through the enzyme glucose oxidase. Today, medical-grade Manuka honey is applied to chronic wounds, post-surgical sites, and burn injuries in hospitals across the UK. And Australia. A jar of raw honey cost 49 cents in 1955. Medical-grade Manuka honey for clinical wound care now sells for more than $50 per tube. The mechanism is identical. The honey is the same. Number 2. Hydrogen peroxide. The small brown bottle with the flip cap is still on every pharmacy shelf in America. It costs almost exactly what it did in 1955, but the guidance on how to use it has changed. 3% hydrogen peroxide was the only concentration she ever needed for a scraped knee, a minor cut, or a wound that looked like it might be getting worse. You likely remember the sound. The sharp fizz of bubbles on broken skin, the brief sting, then quiet. A cotton ball was saturated, held until the bubbling stopped, and then the wound was covered. Hydrogen peroxide kills bacteria through oxidation and releases oxygen that disrupts bacterial cell structure. While it remains inexpensive, medical guidance has evolved. Dermatologists now advise against using it on actively healing wounds because it can damage new tissue. However, for initial wound cleaning, ear care, and minor oral hygiene, the chemistry remains valid. She used it carefully for the right situations. The bottle cost 25 cents, and it still handles most of what she used it for. Number 1. Cod liver oil. This was the teaspoon she gave every child before school. Dr. Benjamin Spock's Baby and Childcare was first published in 1946 and became the second best-selling book in American history after the Bible. In every edition, Dr. Spock recommended one thing that has since disappeared so completely that most people under 50 have never heard of it. Daily cod liver oil for every child, 1 teaspoon every morning before breakfast. Cod liver oil provides vitamin D and long-chain omega-3 fatty acids in concentrations difficult to match elsewhere. The near elimination of rickets in American children by the early 1950s was due significantly to cod liver oil and fortified milk. Sometime in the early 1970s, the morning teaspoon stopped. It became old-fashioned. No one announced that children no longer needed vitamin D. The habit simply fell away because no one reinforced it. The NIH has documented that approximately 42% of American adults are now vitamin D deficient. The global omega-3 supplement market is worth over $5 billion annually, and vitamin D supplements represent billions more. Every capsule does exactly what her teaspoon did every morning. The deficiency she prevented for almost nothing was measured decades later in the blood work of the grandchildren. Your grandmother did not have a wellness routine. She had a medicine cabinet with 12 things in it, and she knew exactly what each one was for. The ailments have not changed, and the remedies have not changed. What changed is whether they were considered worth your time. If these forgotten remedies have changed the way you look at the simple items in your own pantry, please subscribe and like this video. We are dedicated to uncovering the history and wisdom that time tried to bury. Let's cultivate a healthier future by remembering the past. Our next treasury of knowledge will be opening soon.